Hey everybody, welcome back. It's that time again, gnarly data waves. I will be, as always, your chaperone here, Alex Merced, developer advocate here at Dremio, and we got an exciting topic this week with best practices for optimizing Tableau dashboards with Dremio. Okay, really cool topic, really fun stuff. So stick around. But first, I want to make sure I just kind of give you a little bit about what's kind of going on in the industry. And today, what I'd like to do is just kind of highlight the Apache Arrow project for a moment. If you're not familiar with Apache Arrow, it's a pretty exciting project that is creating sort of a standard in-memory format that's going to allow all sorts of tools that use it to just really perform really blazing fast analytics that are going to help enable some of the things we'll be talking about today. But again, Apache Arrow is the in-memory format. Arrow Flight, which is also part of the project, basically takes a step further and talks about how we transport that data, that arrow formatted data from point A to point B. And those two things point together allow you to process the data quickly and move it quickly. And a lot of the tools that are now available today that are really kind of taking advantage of this Arrow in-memory format are tools like Polars, Data Fusion, Dremio, DuckDB. So basically, this Arrow project is really taking the data world by storm with high performance analytics. So keep an eye out for it. If you don't know that much about Arrow, make sure to go check out some of the things we've done over here at Dremio in the past, whether they be articles or webinars. Lots of great content. But with that, I also want to make sure to remind you guys that, hey, if you haven't gotten hands-on with Dremio yet, to go head over to Dremio.com and try out the test drive where you can just quickly kind of run a few queries, see the magic of the data lakehouse in your hands. Okay. Also, make sure you register for Subsurface Live. So just go to that link right there, dremio.com/subsurface/live/2023 and register. It's an online conference, but we are going to actually this year do something a little different where we're going to have some live locations, which you might be able to join us for all sorts of really fun stuff that'll be going on in those locations in San Francisco, New York, and London. So for a chance to be there, head over to that website, dremio.com/subsurface/live/2023 and register. No harm in doing so. So go register. And again, there are further stops in our Dremio Data Hops tour. The first couple of stops have happened and were great successes. So if you want to enjoy the same kind of fun that other people did, make sure to head over to Boston on January 25th or Chicago on February 1st or London on February 2nd to hang out, grab some drinks, and enjoy on the Dremio Data Hops tour. Oh, and with that, we do have a few more upcoming episodes of Gnarly Data Waves because we do this every week. Okay, same bat time, same bat place. And next week, we're going to be doing Apache Iceberg office hours. So if you have Apache Iceberg questions, we got Apache Iceberg answers. And then in the coming weeks, we'll be doing the total economic impact of the data lakehouse. If you're wondering, it's like, oh, what does a data lakehouse do for me in dollars? We'll have that conversation. And getting started with Hadoop modernization. If you are using a Hadoop on-premise cluster and are wondering how to get some more bang for your buck, make sure you attend that one. And with no further ado, back to our featured presentation, best practices for optimizing Tableau dashboards with Dremio. We have two presenters today, Nick Brissot, Senior Director of Product Management at Tableau, and Brett Roberts, Principal Alliance Solutions Architect here at Dremio. Without further ado, the stage is yours.
Well, thanks, Alex, for the introduction. And it's really cool to see all the amazing things that the Dremio team is doing right now. Data Waves is super exciting. I'm super excited about Subsurface as well, but even more excited about some of the Data Brews events that are going on, Chicago, London coming up. Kind of wish I could go to all of those. Today, we have a really special conversation, and I'm joined with Nick Brissot, who's our Senior Director of Product Management at Tableau, as Alex mentioned. And we're going to be talking about all things Dremio, Tableau, and really how can we find some best practices for optimizing your Tableau dashboards with Dremio today. So Nick, thanks so much for joining us. I know we've had a couple conversations in the past. Always excited to have you join us for another webinar. So thanks so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Maybe one day we can connect at one of those brews event and talk about DuckDB, which would be a new database for me. I'm not familiar with that one, but really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to chat with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start by just having you tell the audience, what do you do at Tableau? Like what's your team's mission at Tableau?
Sure. So I've been on the Tableau team for 7.5 years. We are, of course, now part of Salesforce. I've worked on a bunch of different core features at Tableau, including connectivity, some of our proxy capabilities when it comes to connecting from the cloud to on-premise products. And for the last 4 years, I've been heading up a team supporting strategic technology partners, which includes Dremio. And so my team ensures that the two of us collaborate to ensure that we deliver a great customer experience and make sure that we keep up with each other's product innovations.
Yeah, awesome. And it's been a pleasure working with you and your team. And I really feel like, and we'll show this in this webinar today, but we've really built upon some greatness and really delivered some great value, trust, and an experience to the users. So that's awesome. I kind of want to start at more of the higher level though, and talk about what Tableau's focus is. I know that on your website, you talk about analytics for everyone from everywhere, which is super awesome. Let's double click into what does that really mean? Tell me a little bit more about that, and what does that mean for the customer?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Historically, Tableau saw a lot of adoption because we made it much easier for the analyst to be able to see and understand data. In the old BI world, which I was once a part of, it was very challenging for a lot of people to be able to do analytics. They couldn't get access to data. They couldn't get access to the BI platform. And so as an evolution of that self-service revolution that I believe we created, we're now trying to get to more kinds of users and really enable all kinds of people to be able to do analytics, even if they're not super data literate, right? Mm-hmm. So most people in their job at some point need some kind of data or some kind of insight. And so a lot of our focus has been around how do we bridge the gap between business users who might struggle, even with, things like joins or trying to understand aggregations, and help them make better data-driven decisions in their work.
Yeah, I feel like that is like the perfect segue into helping it enable this data democratization, where not everyone's going to have access to like a Tableau desktop, for example, or to the data set, but they still need the analytics. So have you seen this analytics for everyone from everywhere really help drive democratization within your customers?
Yeah, I mean, we have some customers who've rolled out analytics to hundreds of thousands of users. And of course, not all of them are doing deep analysis, right? That would be very surprising if you had everybody with those kinds of skills. And so in many cases, it's about taking parts of the business, ensuring that they can deliver insights to people in those business units, and then helping them perhaps ask other questions, right? And investing in different kinds of ways to consume those analytics.
Yeah. And I feel like that's one of the evolutions that we've been seeing, but there's others out there. So like, how is Tableau seeing the evolution of analytics and really business intelligence in the market today?
I think we're seeing a lot more focus around domains and trying to get people who really understand the domain to help other folks perhaps bring two domains together, right? So you may have heard of data as a product, for example, right? And enabling the people who know the data to create that data product so that they can share it with others. And then the other people will trust that data product and they can perhaps go and do analytics on top of that. That's certainly one evolution. And we hear a lot about it, right? For example, with both helping people create those products, but then also around how do you consume those? How do you know if it's trusted? What's the lineage of that? And so a lot of the other investments that we make are around building that trust when a user is working with data.
And I feel like you've mentioned trust a couple of times, and it's an extremely important part of the experience. It is January. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Is it still okay to say Happy New Year at the end of January?
Today's the last day of January. This is officially the last day is January 23rd.
Exactly right. So it is the last day of January, so I can still say it for a few more hours, but Happy New Year. But I always like to ask this question when we're in January. Bringing out your crystal ball, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the world of analytics for the next year?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think top of mind is really from conversations I've had with customers in the last year, and just sort of projecting on what I've seen in the last 2 years. I think customers are still evolving their data strategy. They're really trying to modernize off of their legacy systems and be able to do more with data, and that means scale. And so we're seeing a lot more of an investment in data lakes, right? Data lakes can enable you to see and understand data at a scale that isn't going to be completely cost prohibitive, and therefore enable them to get more value out of that data. I think another one, which not surprising, it's kind of been buzzy for a few years now, is the AI and ML buzz that's been going on. I think what's really funny recently is the whole noise around ChatGPT, which has really brought, the whole AI and ML to the front in a different kind of way, I guess. Yeah. But I think that the key thing with that one is really, once customers migrate to a platform where they can really scale and get that volume of data and that processing power, that enables a lot of AI and ML use cases. And that's also one of the reasons why it's become so important to many customers, and it's in that discussion.
Yeah.
And then I think the third one I'd mention, which is, I got into the data space in 2010, and the number one challenge that I see, even when all the best technology is available, is data culture. And you have to have a really strong data culture in an organization to be able to become a data-driven organization. And part of that is data literacy.
Yeah.
And certainly I'm hearing from customers like a focus in how do they go and enable more of their folks inside their enterprise to be able to become data literate to some degree, right? So that they can get more value out of all the data that they're collecting and make more data-driven decisions. So I expect data literacy and culture to be a pretty important topic amongst our customers this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen that like kind of be a blocker to, overall adoption of data democratization in the past, right? Where from maybe the top level, hey, we're going to be data-driven, but how does that trickle down to everyone who's actually trying to take advantage of that data? So it's interesting to hear that. Listening to what you said earlier about how you're empowering analytics anywhere for everyone, that really does help expand and help grow that data literacy a lot quicker, which, hopefully that blocker is removed, or at least it's a lot easier in the future. So that's really interesting. You mentioned data lakes. I'm curious, historically, organizations have landed data in the data lake, but it's been a challenge in the past to get data from the lake directly into the hands of the end users. And that's where this kind of like hybrid architecture in the past has kind of come about, where you still need to move data into a warehouse or create cubes or extracts. This idea of the lakehouse, though, and kind of bringing some of the features and functionalities from the data warehouse onto the data lake is becoming more of an in vogue term. What are your thoughts on the lakehouse? What's Tableau seeing, and kind of what are your customers looking at?
Yeah, I think let's look at it from the point of view of the customer, right? Why do they invest in data warehouses? What are the benefits of having a data warehouse? I think you and I are quite familiar with the limitations of the traditional data warehouse, but there is also a lot of goodness, right? You can build a lot of governance, centralized governance within a data warehouse. You can create things like semantic views, right? What people used to call business views into that data. The challenge, of course, is you can run into scaling issues and cost issues, in particular with traditional data warehouses. So when you can bring that kind of governance and semantic capability and all the other things that traditional databases can do, versioning, right, log tracking, all those things, to a data lake, now you've really created something that I think data teams are much more comfortable working with, and empowers the analytics layer to use a data lake as if it was a data warehouse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And I think that's going to be a trend that we see more throughout 2023 into 2024, is the adoption of the lakehouse. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit into our partnership. We've had a long partnership together with Dremio and Tableau, and it's always been around how do we help empower users to get access to their data, query the data as fast as possible, and really build impactful data-driven decisions. What are you most excited about working with Dremio? Just would love to hear, over the last couple of years, what have you seen as far as the partnership, and what's making you excited about the partnership today?
I think the thing that I would like to point to, and I think if I wanted people to understand, like, why do we do this? Why do we partner together? I think the fact that we were able to collaboratively deliver a first-class integration, right, between our two platforms, and collaborate at the product level, collaborate at the voice of the mutual customer level, right? That true partnership, we're really trying to unlock more value for our mutual customers. I think that is like the solid foundation for us to continuing to innovate together and also help our customers solve new business use cases. I think that's that more than anything, right? The better together story around helping customers unlock value. That's what's really exciting for me.
Yeah, and I love the continuous innovation, right? That's what gets me excited because we're always trying to make it better, right? And I remember we started a couple years ago where Dremio used the Tableau SDK to build a connector and to build a taco file, and that worked, and that evolved into the native connector. Would love to kind of hear a little bit about your experience, because as you've worked with the team through the entire process, your experience of working with the Dremio team, and what does that mean for an organization or company to move from having a connector in the SDK world to a native connector?
Sure. I think one thing to understand is really anything built with that SDK is basically like a native connector. So historically, Tableau, when it built integrations to data sources, we built them. They were all one-offs. And over time, as customers needed to connect to more things, it becomes very difficult to manage all those connections. Customers want to connect to N+1 end systems, right? Just think of the application space. There's an infinite number of them. So at some point, we had to do something to solve that problem, but also help our partners who sometimes can move more quickly than we can to innovate, right, together with us. So when we created the SDK, we also created a platform where whenever we innovate in that platform, you get that functionality for free in the SDK, which means customers get that benefit, right? Whether it's performance improvements, we've been investing a lot in authentication and security. And of course, as you innovate on your end and need new features, this is where we can take them back to our platform and SDK team and say, hey, Dremio customers would like to turn on the following features. What is the roadmap for adding that into the SDK? So it's a true partnership from an engineering perspective as well, and we mutually benefit.
Yeah, and completely agree. I think, from my standpoint, moving into, it's always been about how do we provide fast performance, but at the same time, simplified workflow where, within Dremio, you can click a Tableau button and download a pointer file, and you can easily click on that and go right to your table in Tableau. You can connect to Tableau Cloud now. We're using SSO. There's a lot of really cool features that I think over the years we've added to our integration and really evolved our partnership to really support that simplified workflow. And going back to your initial comments around data democratization and really making it accessible for everybody, I think that's super important, right? Because we're making it easier for everyone to access the data.
100% agree.
Yep. And now let's talk about, I would love to kind of get an example. Like, do you have any customers in mind that you can think of that, kind of amplify what Dremio and Tableau have done? Any good customer stories that come to mind?
Yeah, there's one really, really good one. And I want to mention to everybody, this case study is on the Dremio website, and that's NCR. For those of you who aren't familiar with NCR Corporation, I believe they've been around for almost 100 years. If you've ever used some kind of point of sale terminal, it was likely made by the NCR Corporation. I think they came about with the very first cash registers back when people used a lot of cash. So they're a leading software and services-led enterprise. They provide financial, retail, hospitality, all kinds of industries that they service. And being around that long and having that kind of deployment at their customers, they wanted to at some point map out the entire customer experience. So they set a goal to really increase that time to value for their analytics teams to be able to get those insights. So they needed improved scalability, they needed increased capacity, and they chose the data lake approach. It's a good thing we mentioned earlier, right? Like that trend around customers. And I think they really represent what a lot of customers are trying to achieve. So they wanted to bring together as many data sources as they could to help contain and analyze the massive amounts of data that they generate every day. So business goal, let's see and understand the customer experience so we can help them, right? And do better for our business as well. One of the other things that customers often have to deal with is we've got a legacy investment and now we're going to go in a new direction, but we have to let both worlds exist at the same time. Right, lift and shift is not the best way to migrate to something new often. And so what customers will typically do is they will pick pick new use cases and then invest in new technology for those new use cases. So of course, they needed something that would help them navigate both worlds while still providing value to their analysts.
Yeah. So first of all, whenever I go to the grocery store and I see the NCR, logo on the point of sale, I always want to take a little picture or something like that. I love the story as well. How did Dremio help in this? Can you talk a little bit about kind of where Dremio fit into this story and how did we help?
Sure. So remember, the key here was they needed to be able to operate both on a data lake. So they needed a way to go access the data lake data in an effective, governed way, but they also needed to be able to support their traditional data warehouse. So they deployed Dremio between the analytics tools and those two data sources, and then help them build a semantic layer so that users, when they were connecting, it just felt like a single system, right? And they could trust where the data was coming from. And that made querying that data, analyzing it, using it for ML or visualizing it in Tableau much easier, and of course, trusted. And so bringing back to that conversation around the data warehouse benefits, right? Centralized, govern, semantic meaning, plus they didn't have to spend a ton of money on a traditional data warehouse to scale that out. So they got cost benefit plus the business benefit. So now, as a result of this, the analysts can now get really interactive performance dashboards from their Tableau deployment. But it also allows their users to be much more self-sufficient with their data and not have to go back to IT all the time to say, hey, I need access to that new thing. And as we know, and as I've experienced, that can take a long time for very good reasons often. So I think that time to value is the key, plus supporting that hybrid environment.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool story. I actually I did a breakout session at Tableau conference this past year with the NCR team. So if anyone's interested in looking at that, we have the link provided below. You can take a look at that breakout session. And we also have the link for the case study that Nick mentioned earlier as well. I highly recommend you take a look at it. I think it's a really cool story, and it's really indicative of how Dremio and Tableau work together to provide value. So Nick, I love the fireside chat. I love always just hearing what you have to think about and kind of what Tableau is doing. I kind of want to make this a little more real, and let's transition to a demo of how Dremio and Tableau are actually doing this in reality today. So I want to show a demo, and then obviously the title of this session is best practices. So I think we also have some recommendations and some best practices up our sleeve that we can share as well. So let's go ahead and show a demo of what we just talked about.
Great.
Analytics for everyone from everywhere is such a very powerful term, and I'm super excited to hear what Tableau is doing to enable organizations and data users to really take advantage of that. And it was really awesome to see what Dremio and Tableau are doing together. So now let's kind of take what we heard from our conversation with Nick and apply that into a demo of Dremio and Tableau and how we work together to provide users with analytics everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you can see here that we are at Dremio's home screen for Dremio Cloud. And just to quickly orient you to a couple things on the screen, down here on the bottom left, you see all of the sources of data that Dremio is connected to. And we connect to a variety of different data lake sources, data bases, and data connections like SQL Server, Postgres, even Snowflake and Redshift. And we also connect to metastores like Glue and even Dremio Arctic, which is our intelligent metastore for Iceberg. So these are all the data sources that Dremio is connected to. Up here on the top left is Spaces. And Spaces is one of the foundational building blocks for Dremio's semantic layer that empowers everyone to get access to the data really from anywhere. And what Spaces is it's a directory of folders where you can store and share views of the data. And this allows you to collaborate with other people in your organization or on your team based on security and governance permissions, but it allows you to provide or share and work across data sets together. So for example, if I was in sales and I only supported the Eastern sales region, I might only be able to see Eastern sales. And if I clicked on West sales, I wouldn't even be able to see any of the views in there. But somebody in the West would be able to see the views or the data that's in this directory. For the purpose of today's demo, we're going to actually look at a Tableau data, and we're going to look at New York City taxi data. So we're going to click on this view of the data, and we're going to run a quick preview. And you can see here that when we run this, Dremio returns a preview of all of the different fields associated with this data set. And we can scroll through and we can look at all the different columns and the column names and what does that mean. But Dremio also provides you with a wiki-like experience where you click on details and we show just a little bit more in a visually easier to read way all the different column names. We can collapse that, and we can also look at a wiki that shows the volume of the data quality, the description. This is something that the data owner can create and really help the rest of the organization, the team, understand what this data set is and how it can help them. We also provide a graph that shows the lineage of this view of the data. You can see here that this view came from a parent data set called trips that is housed and is remained in an AWS S3 bucket. You can also click on reflections here, and we briefly mentioned reflections in our conversation with Nick, but reflections are a materialized view of the data, and it's one of the ways that organizations can really ensure mission-critical BI performance at scale within Dremio. And a reflection allows you to create pre-calculations of different dimensions and measures, and then store them, and it's an option that Dremio can query that reflection versus the raw data, depending on what that query need is. So now that we have looked at the data, we've looked at the details, and we've ascertained that this is the right data set for our project, we can very easily click on this TDS file here, this button that creates a TDS file that when we click on that, opens up Tableau Desktop. And when we talked about a seamless and integrated user experience, we're actually using SSO here to very easily authenticate within Tableau using our Dremio credentials as well. And you can see that it brings us to our Dremio page. We then authenticate with our Dremio information. And then we can close this screen and we go back to Tableau. And we are now connecting to this view of the data. And what's super nice about this is that we're not just creating a connection to Dremio, we're creating a connection directly to that data set that we wanted to work for. So as a data user, I don't have to worry about knowing where that data set is, understanding the schema or the directory of where that view is. I am connected directly to that view in Tableau. And you can see here that we have all of the same measures and dimensions that we had in that data set. So let's just quickly take a look and do a count of the data. And you can see here that we have the 862 million records in the data set, just like we saw in Dremio. We can do a count of the data, and we can look at that by pickup date. And you can see that we're looking at this as a table each year, the count of records. We can actually just go and we can create a line graph out of that. And you can see now that we have a count by year. We can go ahead and we can do that by month. And we have a little bit more peaks and valleys there. You can also do stuff like count the data by trip distance. And we can do the average trip distance. And let's look at that by year. And we're going to remove the count. And now we're looking at the trip distance, the average trip distance by year. And this is in miles. Now, let's say someone wanted to do this in kilometers instead. We can actually go back to Dremio. We can find that field, trip distance right here. We can create a calculated field. We're going to create the calculation of multiplying trip distance by 1.6. We're going to call this trip distance in kilometers. We're not going to replace this, we're going to add this as a new field in the data set. And we are going to save this as the same in the view. Now, if I went back to Tableau and went back to the data source here, I could refresh. And you can see now we have a new field, trip distance in kilometers. And we can just go down here. We can add this to our view. And we can do this as an average as well. And now we have average trip distance in miles and kilometers by year. And this is just a very easy way of using Dremio to create some of those calculated fields a little bit further upstream than having to do this in Tableau. We could also do something like, let's say we don't just want to look at taxi data, we want to correlate weather data with taxi data as well. Well, we can do a join, and we can look for additional data sets that are either views of the data or data that's in a data lake and join that. So for this one, we're going to pull data from our demo data bucket. We're going to look at NYC weather. We're going to go next. We're going to do this by pickup date and date. So just a very simple SQL join. We're going to apply this, and Dremio writes all the SQL for us, and it's created a new table that is a combination of the trips taxi data set and New York City weather data set, both coming from, in this case, the same source, but you could have data coming from a Postgres database, SQL Server. You could have multiple sources in this as well. So we're actually going to save this as a new data set, and we're going to save this in our Tableau data as what weather and taxi NYC. And so if we wanted to then connect this data set to Tableau, we would just go back and we could click on this TDS file and click on this again, and we would open up a new Tableau desktop worksheet that has the connection to this new view of the data. And there we go. And now you can see that we can correlate weather data with taxi data to, again, provide a more robust analytics experience. So I hope that you enjoyed this just very brief demo of Dremio. I'm now going to pass it back to Nick, and Nick and I are going to talk about some of the best practices for optimizing Tableau with Dremio. All right. Well, that was a demo of how Dremio can promote a bunch of Parquet files into a view of the data or a virtual data set. We can do some calculated fields. We can actually join data, as Nick mentioned earlier, how we can join data from two different sources into one table, and then easily connect that to Tableau, create some visualizations, run some analytics, even go back to Dremio and create new fields within the table and easily reload the table in or refresh the table in Tableau, and then run some additional visualizations and analytics. So without further ado, we're going to go into the third segment of this webinar today, and we're really going to talk to you about 5 best practices that we've come up with for you to be able to optimize your Tableau dashboards using Dremio. So we're going to do this in like a Family Feud style, right? Top 5 answers are on the board. Number 1 is set up reflections in Dremio on large and or frequently accessed data sets. So I think this is super important. Reflections, as we talked about in the demo, are a very powerful tool that helps you accelerate queries and add more performance to your Tableau dashboards. Reflections it's a materialized view of the data. There's different types of reflections, but really it allows you to index different measures and dimensions and create pre-calculations of those. You don't always want to use reflections on every single data set that you have, right? You just want to use those on data sets that are either used by a lot of different people or queried more often, or larger data sets when you're talking, multi-million records within your table. Nick, any thoughts on your end about how reflections impact Tableau?
I think anytime you can push performance benefits down into Dremio, that's the best practice to do.
Cool. Yep. Agree. All right. So number 2 answer on the board, limit use of custom SQL in Tableau. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, just following up on my last statement, in this case, we're going to get a little specific about what goes on in Tableau. So of course, traditionally in Tableau, we abstract away the whole SQL interaction piece. We try to make that easy for users, but we also give them the ability to put in some custom SQL, especially upon the initial connection. Now, the challenge with that is that we issue that within a subquery. So that can have a pretty negative impact on performance. So as I mentioned before, I think if you find yourself trying to do any kind of similar types of workarounds or optimizations, really go look and do them in Dremio first. Yeah. But you will see performance degradation when you use custom SQL in Tableau.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily with Dremio, you do have that user interface so that you can either write SQL or you can actually do some of these custom SQL updates in Dremio through the UI as well. All right, number 3, use Dremio for large data sets instead of loading extracts. Dremio, through the Tableau native connector, creates a live connection to Dremio, and the data is in the source, whether it's the cloud data lake or in a different external database or data source. You don't need to move or copy the data. Using the JDBC driver, you can actually just run live queries directly on the data. Even for large data sets, you don't have to worry about waiting for the report or the extract or the cube and then having to load that into Tableau. Nick, any other thoughts?
Oh yeah, this is one that we get a lot because of course we give the flexibility to our users to either connect live or create extracts. We always recommend connect live, especially if we're talking about something that's in production, because we want you to have the best performance possible and also just the freshest data, right? For something like your enterprise sales dashboard. Occasionally, extracts can make sense if you're doing an exploratory building stage. We've seen customers sometimes working with a really slow data source. But for the most part, stick to live connections.
All right, number 4 answer. Join tables and data sets in Dremio before connecting to Tableau. I think this goes back to anything you can push down, but this is something, again, a great feature that you can do in Dremio while still achieving the performance. And this is something that, again, Alex talked about at the beginning of this webinar with, Apache Arrow kind of being the secret sauce to enabling this. But you can join tables, as you saw in the demo, from different sources, different and really different file types as well in Dremio. And then you can connect that new view of the data to Tableau.
Yeah, and in this case, beyond just a performance consideration, I would say, this is basically as if you're building that semantic view of the data in Dremio. And from a Tableau consumer perspective, this just makes our life easier, right? Because we're not having to go do that work. We're not having to understand what the relationships are. It's already been built into the data layer. So 100% agree. This one, if you can, build that into Dremio before you can do it in Tableau. You can do joins and create relational connections in our product, but you're going to make it much easier for people trying to get value out of that data if you do that down at the semantic layer within the data platform.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Last best practice, number 5, use guided analysis in Tableau. Nick, what are your thoughts?
I think that's always a great idea. We believe we've built a really great user experience to help you get the most value out of your data. I think one other thing I would add here, we'll call it a freebie. We have a lot of really good guidance around building effective dashboards and the do's and don'ts of doing that. One of the great things about using Tableau with a product like Dremio is you can get really fast access to a lot of data and you can build anything you want. But you really need to be careful because some people go a little crazy. They can do something like create 43 quick filters and then wonder why they have a slow dashboard. And that's why it's important to understand what's going on within Tableau and follow our recommendations for really getting the most performance out of both systems together.
Awesome. Thanks. So these are our best practices. Highly recommend that you implement these if you're using Tableau and Dremio today. But if you're not using Tableau and Dremio today, my ask is that you all try Dremio for free. Connect that to your Tableau environment or sign up for Tableau Cloud or Desktop and see what we showed today. See how you can very easily provide data democratization analytics directly on the data lake without having to move or copy data from the source. Nick, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. I know we covered a couple of different areas, but I really do appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and really want to say thank you to you and the entire Tableau team for the partnership. And I'm excited about things yet to come.
I will echo the same, and thank you very much for having me participate today. And I'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining. Look forward to having you on the next Data Waves.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Q&A portion of the show. So I should be all visible now, but we have several questions that have come in for our guests, Nick and Brett. So first question we have, where does Dremio stand out? All those functions can also be done with Tableau Desktop too, right? I'll let you guys take it away.
Nick, do you want to start or do you want me to? Yeah, I think we touched on this in a little bit in the best practices. I think it's about where do you want to optimize for the performance, and where do you want to make sure that you're building the most valuable view of that data. So yes, you can absolutely do that in Tableau Desktop, and a lot of people go and build their relations right between different data sources. But you want to take advantage of the power of Dremio to be able to do that. Anything else you want to add there, Brett?
No, I think you hit it all. I think the more you can do downstream, the better you have, just like we talked about in the best practices.
Okay, next question. Can one pull data from a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake and Azure Blob, and also from on-premise databases, Oracle, MySQL Server, and join those records together to display the data in a merge manner in a BI tool?
Yeah, so absolutely you can do that. You can create joins and views or virtual data sets that are a combination of different joins from different sources, whether that's on-prem data lakes or on-prem databases with cloud data lakes or anything, cloud data sources as well. So you can absolutely do that.
The next question is, can iceberg tables be used in reflections?
Yes, absolutely.
Next question. In order to not have to define relations between tables over and over again, neither in Dremio nor in Tableau, wouldn't it make sense to be able to define relations in Dremio that could then be used for joins in Dremio, for example, or for table associations in Tableau?
Yeah, I think that goes back to kind of how you build out your semantic layer, right, in Dremio, and how you kind of and what your data sources are. So I think there's always some it depends there, but as you build out your semantic layer in Dremio, you can define or you can apply logic to your views of the data, and then you can join that, whether that's specific views, or join those views in the one virtual data set and then connect that to Tableau.
Cool. And
Nick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that one.
Nope, you nailed it.
I always like hearing that.
And another question just came in. Can iceberg tables be used with Oracle and MS SQL Server on-premise RDBMS?
Yeah, Alex, you might be the best one to answer this, but from my knowledge, Dremio has a intelligent metastore catalog called Dremio Arctic that uses Project Nessie as its catalog, and you can create iceberg tables in that and store that in your cloud data lake, and you can create iceberg tables in Dremio from those sources.
Yep, just to add to that, if you're working with on-premise, so let's say you do have like some on-premise sources like Oracle, MySQL Server, they cannot operate as your iceberg catalog. So the JDBC catalog for iceberg isn't supported by Dremio, but what you can do is you can use any of the other catalog options with Dremio. So that could be any of the file storage systems, so Azure, Google Cloud, AWS as far as their object storage. You could use Hive, Project Nessie, any of these other catalog options, and they could be what facilitates the creation of iceberg tables. And when you create reflections, oftentimes reflections under the hood are leveraging iceberg. So if you were to create a join between MySQL table with an iceberg table that you have natively in your Dremio sources, that reflection will be leveraging Iceberg to an extent. So basically, you don't even necessarily have to move the data. You can just turn on reflections where you feel like you need that acceleration, and it'll just kind of work. And I think that is all the questions. Anything you guys would like to add, Brett, Nick?
I think we got one more. Can we use Iceberg tables as a kind of get source control for reflections, test a reflection before making available in production? I mean, Alex, I don't know if you have anything specific to that, but you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, basically with Dremio Arctic, you do have the ability to make branches. So you can have that sort of like get like experience with Arctic. How I have to double check on the status of sort of like being able to have reflections on the different branches in your Arctic catalog. But definitively, you can make sort of like multiple views of the same table and create reflections on those multiple views to kind of also simulate the same experience in the meantime. But I will have to follow up on sort of where that is in the current state of Dremio Arctic. And then we have another question. How well is Dremio priced mainly for faster data source loading time and increased performance? How much Dremio impact the performance? Do we have a POC of it?
Yeah. So Dremio has a couple different ways that can be priced depending on how you consume Dremio, but we price mainly on consumption. So if you have more engines to process data, there's going to be more time. Now, we have done a lot of testing, and there's a lot of third-party benchmarks that we've done that have shown that Dremio does provide fast performance with less engines being used compared to some of the other query engines out there right now. So you do get better performance with less resources being used, hence less Dremio cost as well. And you can absolutely do a POC of Dremio if you would like. We can absolutely take you through that, and you can kind of fine tune what's the right number of engines and right size of those instances that you would like to use based on what your use cases are and the number of users and queries, et cetera. So if that is something that's of interest, we can absolutely fund and support a POC for you to build that out.
Okay, another question just came in. In my organization, we have Dremio and Tableau implemented. We have millions of rows of data. The performance has been slow in the most part. We use a lot of filters on Tableau workbooks. Is that an issue?
Nick, I'll ask you to jump in on the filters part first, and we can kind of go from there.
Yep, this is a common challenge. So I think, again, we touched on it in the best practices where I mentioned, having a lot of quick filters potentially impacting performance. So depending on what you're working with, what Tableau is doing is it's very dynamic. So every time you interact with something, it is issuing live SQL down to the underlying data source. So we don't do a lot of static caching of things like what's contained in, say, a dimension in a dimension, right, to be able to accelerate that filter. So if you've got a dashboard with a lot of filters, then yes, you can run into some performance issues. There are, of course, we are working on creating an improved caching layer for some of those instances, but as of today, certainly if you've got lots of quick filters in your dashboard, you can certainly run into some issues if you've got really large data sets. Keep in mind, we're issuing that live query every single time to that underlying data source, and that's to ensure that what the user is seeing is accurate data and the latest data.
And it'd be interesting to know if there's a reflection on those tables or not, or kind of how that's set up as well. So more than happy to follow up after this. If you want to reach out, we can kind of, take a look specifically to those data sets and kind of see if we can assess what the issue is. But I would start with, kind of looking at the filters, then also seeing if you can apply a reflection to those tables.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody, I mentioned it earlier, we do have a white paper that helps you look at these kinds of things. It's just general guidance around building dashboards. It's not specific to any data source, but certainly, Brett, something that we could look to working on together in the future for optimizing our two platforms.
Absolutely.
Yes. But yeah, no, I think that's all the questions. So first off, I want to say thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Brett. And
Then what I would like to do is just remind everybody that same bad time, same bad place. Next week, we'll be doing Iceberg office hours. So if you have any Iceberg table questions, a whole bunch of us, including Iceberg developers, us and the developer advocacy team, we're all going to be there to answer your questions. So be there. Make sure there's RSVP on it. This recording for this presentation will be posted on YouTube over there at youtube.com/Dremio if you want to watch it again. Also, you can subscribe on Spotify as a video podcast. Just look up Gnarly Datawaves on Spotify and you can subscribe and it'll get delivered right there with all your other podcasts. But thank you all for coming and I'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.